Hi folks, welcome to episode 97 of the Epochs of the Lotus Eaters. I'm joined by Bo, and today we're going to talk about the Alamo. Can I be honest? I don't really know much about the Alamo.
Well, that's fair enough. Not many people outside America, or outside Texas even.
I was going to say, it's always been one of those sort of Texan things where they say, remember the Alamo? And I remember looking at the Wikipedia page, it was like, yeah, 200 people died. And I'm like, I'm from Europe. Right. Millions of people died.
So to all Americans out there and Texans, most people in the world don't know actually what happened, what went down at the Alamo.
No. I assume it was some sort of famous last stand.
Exactly.
Which, don't get me wrong, is a very notable thing, but it's of such small scale, it doesn't seem to have much bearing on things. But maybe I just don't know. Maybe
so small scale, yes. Not having much bearing on things, no.
Right, okay.
So it had massive significance, despite like almost completely, regardless of how small the numbers are. And the numbers are small. Compared to the American Civil War or the Napoleonic War, it's tiny. It's absolutely tiny.
I'm not trying to be contemptuous either.
No, right. It's not.
It's just that when it's like, okay, 200 people died here or whatever, it's like, okay.
But the significance of it is massive.
Right.
So I want to tell the story of the Alamo, but actually won't spend a massive amount of time on the Alamo itself, but talk about before and after. So in other words, why the Alamo is so important.
Yeah.
I did mention it to three people, an Aussie, a Brit and an Irishman. And all of them were like, they'd never even heard of the Alamo, let alone what actually happened.
Right, okay.
So there you go. In different countries, you have different mythologies grow up that are important to your sort of national identity.
I bet the average Californian couldn't tell you anything about it.
Yeah. I think outside of Texas or the South, probably, may not know.
So as I understand, it was something to do with Texan independence or
something? That's it. So this story is of the Texan Revolution.
Right. And don't worry, I'm all for Texan independence if they want it, you know.
Of 1835 to 36. So that's the story. So, so to jump straight into it, Texas is a sort of a special state. It's they all think they're sort of special, and quite rightly, because in a way, each state is almost like a country. I've said that before.
I've been to Texas, and I actually do kind of support this idea that Texas is kind of special in the United States. They are a bit different to the rest of them, and in a positive way as well. I really like Texas.
The Lone Star State. Everything's big in Texas. From the skies to the prairies to the cars to the people, everything's bigger.
But the people were all really nice. Like I met dozens and dozens of people. They're all very kind, and not just people who knew me either. Just randos, you know. They're just very, very well mannered people.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's the impression I get. I've never been to Texas. I've been to America, but never actually been to Texas. I would love to go.
The pecan pie is amazing. It is genuinely amazing.
And they are sort of special in a few different ways. Apart from being among the big, I mean, California's bigger, but other than that, Texas has got like a massive industry, massive oil industry, and there's all sorts of reasons why they're just among the premier states of America, you know. Well, one of the reasons why they're really quite special, their history is a little bit special, is that they were entirely their own republic for a while.
It wasn't like 10 years or something.
Yeah. Yeah,
they were independent.
They basically managed to win their independence from Mexico, and then they were their own republic for quite a few years before they were annexed by the United States. Willingly, they wanted to be. Right. There was a small minority that didn't want to. There was a fair few actual people that wanted to remain as their own republic, but most people wanted to be annexed by the United States and were. So they're a little bit special. So the story of their revolution. So, and the Alamo, which is a famous last stand, and there's something about last stands, aren't there?
Yeah,
doomed
romantic.
Last stand. Exactly romantic. Yeah, like Rorke's Drift or Thermopylae or something. So where to start? The bit of land we now call Texas.
The bit, it's massive.
Oh, it's gigantic. Yeah, it's like bigger than all of France or something.
Yeah.
It's massive. It's like the size of Western Europe. Yeah. It's absolutely gigantic. Where I mentioned, like, the skies are bigger and things. You know, deep in the heart of Texas.
It's also totally flat as well.
It really is.
It's massive and flat. So you can see for miles. And it's kind of intimidating, to be honest. I get a bit agoraphobic in America because everything is so wide. It's just, I'm not used to it. Because obviously in England, everything's quite small and closely packed. And I'm used to like the sort of almost the sort of comforting nature of things being closer to you. In America, everything's just miles away from everything else, and it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's giant. It's so big that it's got just really different terrain and things. Like the Gulf region on the Gulf of Mexico is quite different to sort of the Northwest, which is, like there's prairie regions, and East Texas is more heavily populated, and there's massive rivers. San Antonio River comes into this story a fair bit, and that's one of the big rivers. But the Colorado, it's a giant, massive country of all sorts of different things going on. When you get a piece of land that big, it's not just going to be one thing. And so the bit of land we now call Texas is, to be fair, when you look at the map, it's sort of, it's not near the East Coast at all.
No.
And then when people, the first frontiersmen sort of started heading, in a concerted effort, started heading west, they went much more northerly routes into modern places like Colorado, or even more northern, like
Oklahoma.
Yeah. So in any way, by the late 18th century, Texas was still hardly populated. There were like a few thousand. Well, the French tried to settle it a bit in the 17th century and failed, because it's quite hard. It's quite a hard terrain to settle. It's not immediately very, very easy to settle. Yeah. So the French tried and failed. The Spanish tried and failed, essentially tried and failed. They set up various missions. Like, for example, down the San Antonio River, they set up 5 different missions where they literally build a little church.
Yeah. They did this everywhere.
Right. They tried to convert the native Indians to Catholicism.
Which I'm sure they were just eager to do.
It was mainly Apache land at that point. Nowadays, there's lots of different Native American tribes settled in Texas, but that's after all sorts of displacements and things. Originally, it was mainly the Apaches, but not only the Apaches. People that are into their Native American history will say that's very low resolution. There's actually, or even the Apaches is sort of a coverall term. There's loads of different types of tribe, of people. But anyway, they won't actually, the Apaches don't really feature all that much in the story, because even by this point, even by sort of the 1830s, they're sort of undeniably bested, outgunned, outclassed in terms of industry, in terms of firepower, in terms of all sorts of things already by this point.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we won't really be mentioning the first peoples all that much. So that land, if we go back to the age of Jefferson and the Louisiana Purchase, which is 1803, and I've mentioned the Louisiana Purchase a couple of times on Epochs. Pardon me.
Probably the best deal in the history of deals.
Unbelievable deal. The United States basically doubled its area.
Wasn't it Napoleon they purchased it off?
Yeah.
Because he needed money for a war. I wonder who he was fighting with.
So what happened where we did 2 or was it even 3 epochs on the Peninsular War, where Napoleon invades Spain? Well, when he did that and forced the Spanish crown to abdicate, the abdications of Bayonne, he sort of just, again, sort of at a stroke of a pen, got all the Spanish holdings in what at that point they called Louisiana, which is nothing like the modern state of Louisiana. It's just this massive swathe. I'll put a map up.
Yeah.
It's just like a third almost of the middle of America.
Yeah, it goes right up into Canada as well. It's enormous. It's like everywhere that the French had set up a fort, basically, because, I mean, the place is essentially underpopulated. There's no one there. And so up various rivers and things like that, just going across the entire United States. I remember seeing a map of it a while ago thinking, Jesus Christ. Well, that's like the US being like, yeah, can we buy this off you? It's been brilliant. How brilliant is this?
People have said that's the best deal of all time.
For America.
For America, yeah. So Louisiana goes from, the Gulf of Mexico all the way up sort of the Rockies, all the way up the middle of America, all the way up to Canada. So when France, Napoleon got hold of it, incidentally, the Spanish still held on to big parts of modern-day Florida. But anyway, he realised that he couldn't hold it. He was in the middle of a skull-crushing 20-year European war, he didn't have the men to hold that remotely. And so in order to prevent the British from just going in and taking it, he thought, well, okay, just to prevent that, I'll sell it to the Americans. President Jefferson, 1803. And Jefferson's like, yes, please, bit his hand off. It's like, yes, please. It's like a few dollars per square mile.
Yeah, it's
crazy.
Amazing.
Yeah, unbelievable. And so again, as I say, a stroke of a pen, suddenly the United States is twice as big. But it didn't stretch all the way to the Pacific Ocean, though.
No.
So the far west, places like, Montana, Oregon, California, all that sort of thing, was still sort of completely still Indian territory,
Although the Spanish did lay claim to it all. If you see a map of the Spanish Empire, you can see along the west coast of America, they've claimed it. But again, the same problem, they're going to have the same problem Napoleon had. It's like, look, this is 10,000 miles away and there's almost no one there. So
that's a good point. They absolutely claimed it, but it was purely on paper.
Yeah.
Purely on paper.
Yeah.
And in fact, where the line of the Louisiana Purchase, like the borders of where it ended and when it stopped, what exactly did Jefferson buy there?
Who knows?
It was never properly written in stone.
The French probably didn't even know.
Right. Yeah.
Imagine being in Paris and being like, right, on the other side of the world, on a continent where there's hardly any people, we've got a line on a map. Like, oh, geez, what does that represent?
And sometimes they follow the rivers, so you can say that, but often not.
Yeah.
So it's like, so anyway, you went from being, if you did happen to live out, if you were one of the few European settlers in that part of the world, you went from being a Spanish subject to a French citizen to an American citizen in the space of a few months, or like a month or something, very, very short. Napoleon sold it on really quick, really. Yeah. He needed the money. He needed to get rid of the headache and the money.
Tactically sound move. I can see why he did it.
Right, yeah.
What's the point in this?
Yeah, no, right, absolutely right. From his point of view, everyone's a winner, really.
Yeah.
Apart from Britain, and that was sort of the point in all sorts of ways.
I mean, how did that work out for him?
And so anyway, when Napoleon is eventually defeated at Waterloo, it sort of goes back by default to the Spanish Empire, the crumbling remnant of the Spanish Empire. Yeah. It sort of formally goes back to them. Parts of it, not what Jefferson had bought, but all the places west of that. Yeah. And so, exactly as we've said, what exactly had he bought? So big parts of what we now call Texas were sort of disputed. Did the Louisiana Purchase go up to this river or this river? And the Americans said, it goes all the way up to the Rio Grande. Rio Grande.
Did they say that?
It goes all the way, so that's all ours now, right? And Spain was like, no. No.
Okay, but if Spain can say no all they want, but it turns out the Spanish are horrible at war.
A little bit.
So, you can say no. The Americans have got English technology, English motivations. They've got English institutions, which are a lot better at war.
And it's interesting. A lot of the white American settlers into Texas are always called Anglos.
Yeah.
And they're not always English.
Sure.
Can be all sorts of things. Quite a lot of Germans, actually. But it's Scottish, Irish, lots of English as well. But if you're sort of very white, blue-eyed, blonde-haired, anything like that, you're just called an Anglo. Or a Texian, they get called, Texians. So the Spanish settlers, the Spanish people of Spanish descent in Texas, were called the Tejanos, and the whites, the pure whites, are sort of always called Anglos or Texians. Okay, so that's
is that where the name Texas comes from? Is it?
I don't know exactly. I guess I'm not sure exactly where the word Texas comes from. I'm not sure. Should probably know that. Okay. Anyway.
The etymology of most words is actually poorly known. I mean, no one really knows where the name America came from. They assume it was some Spanish explorer.
Is that not a definite thing? I thought that
I didn't think it was. I thought it was just the most likely.
Amerigo.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I have seen that people have said that, and then modern researchers have said, is that right though? Is that the case?
So how did California get its name? No one's really sure.
Yeah.
Because when these things are being discovered and first charted and settled, there's no bureaucracy overseeing any of this, and so the colloquial name just comes out of the sort of the mire of people moving in and out, and it just sticks.
And quite often in America, they take the sort of a Native American name, but then that would have been bastardized.
Anglicized, yeah.
It would have been anglicized. So the actual Native Americans are like, well, that's not even how we say it.
Yeah.
but,
Look,
but it sticks. And
when you've got some free time, just look at the names of the deserts around the world. They almost all translate to desert. So it's desert. The Sahara Desert, the Gobi Desert, they're all just the local word for desert. Because obviously some explorer was like, what's this called? And they were like, desert. Don't you have deserts where you come from? And the local explorer invariably would go, no, actually, I don't, you know.
Yeah, I'm afraid not, old boy.
Yeah.
Not in Surrey, no, there isn't one.
A bit of a one in Wales.
So what's interesting to me, I'm actually fascinated by Mexican history. I'm really interested in Mexico, both ancient, medieval, and modern Mexico. A few years ago, I went on a kick of trying to understand modern Mexican politics.
Oh, yeah.
I want to do an Epochs at some point, maybe Contemplations with Josh at some point, about the cartel wars in Mexico.
It's mad.
And how it's basically a never-ending civil war in Mexico. I'm prepared to describe it as that.
I mean, look, we can talk about this at some point, because I would love to, in fact, I'll watch your episode of it. Because I really want to understand why the Mexican government doesn't just conscript 100,000 Mexican young men, give them guns, and then just wipe out these cartels. I just can't understand. Because, I mean, like, any sensible state would do that. Like, in El Salvador right now. So, okay, what we're going to do is build an army. We're going to go take them out, and we're going to be merciless about it. So, yeah, that's the right thing to do. Why aren't you doing that?
There's one particular cartel called CJNG, and it's just...
Oh, they're evil.
It's unbelievable, the brutality.
Yeah.
Like
profound.
Dismembering people alive, and all sorts of things.
Yeah. And then the same with the El Salvador gangs, like playing football with people's severed heads and stuff like that. It's like,
as brutal as humans can be to one another, pretty much.
Yeah. It's literally the height of savagery.
Lots and lots and lots of innocent people en masse being executed, all sorts of stuff. Well, one of the reasons I think is because the corruption goes all the way to the top of Mexican politics. Like, even the police are absolutely corrupted. So that sometimes they'll try and use like the special forces teams, like Navy special forces that aren't corrupted just about, will try and will have gun battles with the cartels. Sometimes win, sometimes don't. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Anyway, I'm fascinated by Mexican history and politics. One of the things I would say is that Mexican politics from day one has just been a complete car crash.
Obviously.
Anyone out there from Mexico want to take me up on that?
And I'm going to go one step further and say it's because they have Spanish institutions.
Maybe.
Come at me.
But it is also fascinating. A little bit of revolving door or musical chairs for who gets to be the leader of Mexico from day one to today.
Oh, yeah. There were loads of civil wars and internal coups and things. I'm
interested in all sorts, even South America, like Simon Bolivar, all that stuff I'm really interested in. I'd love to, we've got to do a series on Simon Bolivar at some point. I know there's so many things on the list. But Simon Bolivar is among my favourites. Anyway, we're talking about Mexico here. So what happened was, in 1821, Mexico get their full independence. Well, they have a war with Spain. And they win their full independence in 1821, which is a little bit surprising in the sweep of history, because you would have thought that by the time when Napoleon sort of basically destroyed the Spanish monarchy, you would have thought maybe the people of Mexico might have just taken their independence at that point, but it wasn't until 1821, which is long after Napoleon.
Yeah, well, not that long after.
Well, I mean, he's defeated in 1815.
Yeah, so it's only 6 years.
Well, yeah, but what happened? What are you doing for those 6 years?
Well, yeah, sure, but like in the pre-modern world, 6 years is a long time.
Or even that, the monarchy was the Spanish monarchy was first deposed in like 1807.
Yeah.
So you're talking like more like 14 years.
Sure, but it's still
anyway.
It doesn't feel like a long time to me.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Like, inertia would be enough to keep things moving in the same direction for a while, I imagine.
But they already had Spain's control of what became Mexico was already very, very, very weak. Being controlled from Madrid. I mean, it wasn't nominally. They were being controlled from Madrid, but quite a light touch. Anyway, in 1821 they get their full independence, and in 1824 they passed their first sort of full constitution, sort of a proper constitutional settlement. And so this Constitution of 1824 comes up again and again. Because as you might guess, Mexico suffer from just dictators and things quite soon.
What a surprise.
Yeah, what a surprise. So the bit of land we call Texas just immediately just becomes part of Mexico. So again, I'll put maps up and everything, but the Mexico as it existed in the 1820s is much bigger than today's Mexico.
It's massive.
Right.
It's the Mexican Empire.
Right, yeah.
Which is, again, a very generous way of framing it, because the much of the imperial territory would have been barren.
Right.
Empty.
Well, like the Mojave Desert, places like New Mexico, Arizona.
Much of California.
You're right. Southern California.
We own this. Yeah, what do you own? Well, it's desert. There are 5 people living here, but it's ours.
Yeah. Places like Nevada, Utah, Southern California. Northern California is very, very lush. I've been to Northern California, the giant redwoods.
Yeah.
Southern California is much, much more arid.
Yes.
I mean, well, big chunks of it are just desert, basically.
Yeah. I went there. Didn't like it. Lots of desert.
Yeah.
Can't stand it.
Yeah, I've been through Nevada. I mean, Mexico in the 1830s didn't quite stretch quite that far, but nonetheless, yeah.
I got into a bit of a barney on Twitter the other day with Americans by being like, Americans will go into a desert and say they're communing with nature. So there's no nature there. It's barren rock. Sorry, I'm from England. You don't know what nature is if you're in the desert. Like, I'm not having it. Not having it. I don't like it.
I crossed the Utah Salt Flats.
Oh, yeah.
And
I went to Utah,
that is as
barren,
as desolate as it could possibly be.
Yeah,
it's just death out there.
Yeah, I don't understand. I mean, I can see people saying, "Oh no, this is beautiful." It's like, I can see that to you it is.
For 10 minutes before you get back in your air conditioned car, it's beautiful.
Exactly. But you don't live where we live. It's very lush.
Any longer than 10 minutes on the Utah Salt Flats in the blazing summer sun, it's death.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
It's very rugged. It's
unbelievably.
There is a beauty to it, but you're missing the kind of there's almost an inviting nature to Europe. Like there's an inviting aspect to European nature. The countryside, that America just can't have, and like it's not the same. I'm not saying it's not a beautiful place or it's not a good, not an enriching place to go to, but there's definitely an aspect to the countryside in Europe that is very different to America.
Yeah, it's
not unwelcoming here, whereas in America it feels hostile.
Really verdant and nice. However, having said that, the United States is so big that you've got everything.
Yeah.
So, for example,
the Northeast.
I went through Colorado, the Rockies in Colorado. Some of that was the most beautiful scenery I've ever seen. Like truly breathtaking. In fact, the juxtaposition between the Colorado and Utah is unbelievable. You go from some of the most verdant, beautiful landscapes to the most desolate quite quickly. You come down out of the Rockies.
Yeah, but I'm happy to generalize. Feel free to chew me out in the comments.
Went across Kansas, and that's just sort of super flat prairie type thing. So you've got everything in America, and the east and the west coasts are very different.
Northeast is quite nice. So New England sort of area.
Yeah. Places like Vermont.
Yeah.
Or anything like that. Very, very, very nice. Very, very nice. And then you've got like swamps and things down in Florida. So it's so massive. You've got almost everything.
To be fair, I went to Florida as well. And Florida was actually all right. It was just the heat of Florida. I mean, I didn't go into the swamps, obviously. So, the bits that have been settled are very nice and, green, unlike California. Another win for Florida over California, frankly.
I was once in Memphis, Tennessee, and it's the closest thing to being in a sauna I've ever experienced. And I've been to Southeast Asia, I've been to rainforests, and I've been to extremely humid places. Nothing came close to Memphis, Tennessee.
When I was on Joe Rogan, he was in like this part of California called the Valley. It wasn't Death Valley. Everyone thinks it's Death Valley. It wasn't that. But it was this valley that was between these two mountains. And you could feel the heat radiating off the mountains. And so you felt like you were in a sauna, like you were wrapped in boiling hot towels. And you just couldn't, no one stood out on the street because it was just too hot. Right. Like literally, you stand there, you can feel the heat on your skin, like burning into your skin when you're standing in the shade. It's mad how hot it was.
Yeah.
So
yeah, when I went across Nevada again, similar thing. You feel like, I'm in an oven.
Yeah.
But there's sort of that dry heat.
Mm.
I always feel like when I've been to Spain, that's sort of that dry heat.
Yeah.
Then the very, very wet, humid heat, like in Southeast Asia.
Mm.
Two different types of things,
Very
right?
much.
But
Florida obviously had the wet heat.
Yeah. Like a sauna, right?
Yeah,
like someone's just poured water on the heater in a sauna.
It wasn't so bad, though. I mean, the temperature was a pain, but it wasn't that bad. It was tough though, and it was always everything's air conditioning. You see why? I can't even imagine 100 years ago, before air conditioning, what things must have been like in these places.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. And Texas was the same. The temperature can get mad. But anyway.
Yeah. Sorry, anyway, a diversion here about US...
Englishmen reflect on foreign parts.
On the American climate.
Yeah.
So...
We don't like it.
Yeah, it's too hot.
And in other places it's too cold. And anyway.
Yeah, up in Alaska.
Well, not even there, Minnesota. Like, just an unbelievable amount of snow.
Oh, right, yeah. Like places like in Chicago can get, terribly, terribly cold.
Yeah, anyway.
So
enough about MAGA country.
A bit about Mexico then. So they declared their independence from Spain, won their independence off of Spain. And their country was massive and included sort of, modern Texas.
Yeah.
And it was even then still almost entirely unpopulated. I've heard people say there was only 2, 3 odd, maybe 4, absolute most 1,000 Mexican or Spanish settlers there. So for a piece of land as big as Texas is, almost unpopulated.
Yeah, we wouldn't really recognize it as having a population,
right? So in order to make it to govern it properly and to try and stop Apache and other Indian endless raids, they wanted to populate it. The French had failed, the Spanish had failed, the Mexicans are sort of failing to do it. So they actually encouraged Americans to go there. People from the southern states.
Oh, really?
People from places like Virginia and Tennessee.
I did wonder how Texas became anglicized, shall we say. I always wondered why they moved there, because as I understand it, it was a province of Mexico. So why would you have a load of Anglo-Americans there?
They wanted it to be settled and to have start making towns and industries and farms and start making something of the land.
You know what? This is becoming quite an interesting fable about immigration and the consequences of.
It is actually. It very much is, because Anglos started flooding there. Really started flooding there because this was the deal the Mexican government said. You say, come to Texas, come to Mexican Texas. You have to become a Mexican citizen. You have to convert to Catholicism.
Oh, yeah.
But then you can have 4,000 acres almost for free.
I mean, that's pretty good because...
4,000 acres?
Yeah.
Not for free. At first they said it was like $160, which is almost nothing. And then later, I think I've seen somewhere they went down to $30. Yeah. And also, you didn't have to put the money down.
Oh, really?
So it's basically free, sort of, in a sense, almost.
You just pay it off by farming for a few years.
And so the American dream, lots of people from Europe go to the Americas for this dream, having your own plot of land and working it. Well, Mexico's offering you a better dream than America even, right here. Yeah. All you've got to do is move out into the vast, open, almost empty plains of Texas, convert to Catholicism, and become a Mexican citizen, and then you can have your own 4,000 acres. It's mad.
It's crazy, actually. Like all you have to do is get on a boat and somehow get to that. Just cross the stretch of water, and then you'll be put up in a 5-star hotel.
Yeah, well, it's a very attractive deal. Put it that way.
It is a very attractive deal, isn't it?
Which one are we talking about here? It's so attractive that anyone that was sort of that sort of was of the mind to up and move, because not everyone wants to do that, sort of loads did. So in the space of just a few years, a couple of decades, Texas was flooded by about 30,000 Anglos.
Bloody hell. And so that's interesting. So it kind of maintained the Spanish character of those 3,000 or 4,000 Spanish settlers, I'm sure.
It did. So by that time, there was a few more Tejanos. So something like 8,000 Tejanos and 30,000 Anglos, and 15,000 slaves. There was still slavery.
Yeah.
Incidentally, in the Civil War, Texas sided with the South.
Yeah.
But anyway, Mexico, just to quickly say on that, Mexico had outlawed slavery in 1829, but only nominally, only on paper. You could still have indentured slaves for 99 years. You could still own an indentured slave for 99 years. So there was still slavery, essentially.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.